Have to admit, I almost walked out the moment I saw him waiting at the bar. Not because he was ugly or anything. In fact, he was pretty much the opposite, but because I knew exactly what he thought he was doing there. And I wasn't about to interrupt his little delusion. So there I was, sitting alone at this cramped little downtown bar, nursing a beer that was probably flat by now, scrolling through my phone and trying to forget that I'd agreed to meet. Well, no one, really. I wasn't supposed to be here. The truth is, I was just killing time before a work thing across the street, and I figured a drink wouldn't hurt. But then I caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye. Tall, kind of nervy, with this hopeful look that made me cringe just a little. He glanced over at me, then looked away like he was trying to prepare himself for some grand romantic disaster. And just like that, I realized he thought I was his blind date. See, I know this kind of situation sounds like a rom-com setup, but let me be clear. This wasn't me trying to be mysterious or playing some game. Sometimes life just throws weird moments your way, and you go along with it because, honestly, it makes things a little less boring. He didn't know me, of course. I knew his name, Jason, because he'd texted me a few times this evening, trying to confirm our meeting spot. The funny thing is, I never replied. Not once. But I saw him waiting, hopeful and maybe a little nervous, and instead of correcting him, I just stayed put. I'm guessing you're wondering why. Why would I let someone believe I was their blind date when I wasn't even supposed to be here? Well, that's the thing. Sometimes it's easier to just go along with the story someone's telling themselves. Maybe because I was curious about him, or maybe because I was tired of my own routine. I don't know. What I do know is that when he finally stood up and walked over to me, smiling like he was about to meet the most important person in his life, something inside me shifted. I tried to play it cool, like I was just another guy he'd randomly met, but inside, I was scrambling to figure out what the hell I was doing. And that's how this whole thing started. The night I pretended to be someone's blind date, and the night I didn't want the story to end. He slid into the seat next to me like he belonged there, flashing that slightly awkward smile again. "Hey," he said, voice a little higher than I expected. "I'm Jason," I shrugged, not exactly sure what else to say. "Hey, I'm Mike." Not my real name, but it felt better to keep it vague. I didn't want to spoil whatever fantasy he'd built up, and honestly, it made things easier. Jason took a deep breath, like he was summoning courage. "So, the place looks nice, huh? I was worried you might not show up." I realized right then this guy had been actually nervous, maybe more than I would have thought. "Yeah, me too," I said, though it was a total lie. I was here just to pass time. But suddenly it wasn't so casual anymore. Maybe I wanted to see where this could go. He tucked a stray lock of hair behind his ear and leaned in a little. "I guess blind dates are always a gamble, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose." I wasn't sure if I meant that about him or the whole situation, but the words caught in my mouth in a way that surprised me. Jason laughed, a little short, like he wasn't quite sure if he should be amused or nervous. "So what do you like to do when you're not standing up blind dates that never happened?" He grinned, and for a moment I felt like I had just been caught red-handed. I smirked. "I'm more of a Netflix and bad pizza kind of guy. You?" "Definitely the same. I have this weird obsession with documentaries, though. Like, I can't stop watching them." "That's actually kind of cool," I admitted. "I mean, I watch them too, but mostly to fall asleep." He laughed, and it wasn't forced. Something about it felt real. We talked about small stuff then. The usual first meeting nonsense. Favorite bands, bad habits, weird things about our jobs. I learned he worked in a bookstore, which made me like him even more. There was something about people who work with books that always seems thoughtful, like they live partly in another world. At some point, the bartender gave us a curious look like he was onto our little game. Jason kept checking his phone, and I noticed the text from T that he kept ignoring. I didn't ask, and he didn't offer an explanation. I figured whatever it was part of that complicated life I was just dipping my toes into. Hours went by faster than I expected. The bar got louder, the music changed to something more upbeat, and the easy conversation between us started to feel less like small talk and more like a real connection. The kind you don't get when you're just swiping through profiles or exchanging quick texts. "So," Jason said suddenly, a little hesitantly. "This might sound weird, but do you want to get out of here?" Maybe take a walk? There's a park nearby. I looked at him, the way the dim light caught his face, the nervous hope still lingering in his eyes. Something about the whole situation was ridiculous, but also kind of perfect. Sure, I said. Why not? We left the bar together, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was quieter here, just the soft hum of streetlights and distant cars. As we walked side by side, I kept thinking about how strange it was that I just pretended to be someone's blind date, and now I actually wanted to be. He talked about his favorite books and the weird characters he met at work, and I found myself sharing more than I usually would with a stranger. He listened like he actually cared, like I wasn't just some random guy he'd been set up with. Eventually, we ended up sitting on a bench overlooking the park's small pond. The moon reflected off the water, and the world felt calm in a way it hadn't all week. Jason turned to me, a little shy but serious. You know, I was really nervous about tonight. I thought maybe coming here would be a disaster, but it's been really nice. I nodded, feeling something in my chest twist in a way I wasn't expecting. Yeah, me too. For a moment, we just sat there, the silence filled with something unspoken but powerful. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I wasn't his date, that I was just some guy who saw a story and decided to be part of it. But the words stuck in my throat, because right then, none of that mattered. What mattered was that this weird accident had brought us together, and maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something neither of us saw coming. The silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel awkward. It was like the kind of quiet that says more than words ever could. I glanced over at Jason, his profile sharp in the moonlight, eyes tracing the ripples on the pond. I wondered what he was thinking, if the same thoughts were buzzing around his head like mine. After a while, he shifted and finally broke the quiet. So, Mike, or whatever your real name is, he said with a teasing grin. I chuckled, feeling a bit of warmth spread in my chest. You caught me. It's actually Dan. Dan, he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. I like it. There was a pause, and then he asked, Why the fake name? I hesitated, then shrugged. I guess I wasn't sure what I wanted tonight. Didn't want to complicate things. He nodded, like he understood, even though I hadn't said much. Sometimes it's easier to just go along with something than to explain all the messy parts. Exactly, I said, and honestly, I didn't want to be that guy who ruined someone's hope. Jason smiled, but there was a softness in his eyes now that made me want to tell him everything. The truth about how I ended up here, the loneliness I'd been carrying around, the way I'd almost walked away before I even sat down. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, he changed the subject. What about you? Ever been on a real blind date before? I laughed. Only once, and it was a disaster. Guy was more interested in his phone than me. Jason winced. That's rough. I've had some bad dates too, but they usually make for good stories later. Yeah, I agreed. If you survive them. We sat on the bench longer, talking about everything and nothing. I told him about the little bookstore near my apartment that I loved, the way I'd spend hours browsing and pretending I was somewhere else. He told me about the weird characters at his job, the old man who always tried to sneak in extra books, the teenage girl who was obsessed with true crime podcasts. There was a moment when he reached out and brushed a stray leaf off my jacket, and my heart did this stupid flip that I wasn't expecting. I looked at him, and for a second, it felt like the whole world was just us, sitting on that bench under the stars. Hey, Jason said softly, can I be honest? Always, I said. I'm really glad I came tonight, even if it's not exactly what I thought it was. Me too. We sat there a bit longer, neither of us moving. Then, out of nowhere, Jason leaned in and kissed me. It was gentle, a little uncertain, but full of something electric that sent a shock straight to my chest. I kissed him back without hesitation. In that moment, all the doubts, all the lies, all the pretending faded away. It was just us. Two people who met by accident, maybe even a little lie, but who found something real in the middle of it. When we finally pulled apart, Jason smiled shyly. So, I guess this makes us something now? Like, real date status? I laughed, feeling a grin spread across my face. Yeah, I think it does. We stood up together, the night suddenly feeling a little less lonely. We walked back toward the city, arms brushing against each other. The future still uncertain, but way more exciting than I'd expected when I first sat down at that bar. And despite every crazy twist of the night, I knew one thing for sure. Sometimes, the best stories come from the moments you don't plan at all. Walking back toward the city, the cool night air felt different somehow. Lighter, maybe. Like the space between us had changed, even though we hadn't said much more after that first kiss. Jason's hand brushed against mine, and without thinking, I laced my fingers through his. He squeezed gently, and I realized how much I didn't want this night to end. We stopped outside his apartment building, a modest brick place just a few blocks from the park. He looked up at me, eyes reflecting the streetlight, and I could tell he was wondering if this was the moment to say goodnight or something more. "Do you want to come in for a minute?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes, to see where this would go. But another part was still tangled in the mess of half-truths and unspoken things. I didn't want to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "Sure," I said finally. "Just for a bit." His smile was like a sunrise, warm and a little shy. We stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind us. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with bookshelves crammed with everything from crime novels to travel memoirs. The faint scent of coffee and something woodsy filled the air. I felt strangely at home. Jason poured us both a glass of wine, and we sat on the couch, a little closer than before. The city noises faded to a dull hum outside the window. "So," he said, swirling his glass, "how real is this, Mike? Or Dan? Whatever you want to go by." I took a sip of wine and looked at him. There was no point hiding anymore. "Honestly, I wasn't supposed to be your blind date. I just saw you waiting there, and I don't know. I didn't want to disappoint you." Jason's eyes softened. I figured something was off, but I didn't want to ask. "I guess I was hoping you'd be more than just some guy who showed up." I swallowed hard. Me too. We talked for hours after that, and for once, it felt like the kind of conversation where you can actually be yourself. No pretending, no hiding behind names or expectations. Just two people figuring out what this unexpected connection might mean. There were moments of silence, too, comfortable ones, where we just sat close and let the world slow down. I learned about his dreams, opening a little bookstore cafe someday, traveling to Iceland, writing a novel about the odd customers he met. He learned about my fears, the way I'd been too scared to open up for a long time, how I'd been stuck in a cycle of distractions and half-hearted dates that never went anywhere. When the night finally started to wind down, Jason stood and walked me to the door. We lingered there, neither wanting to say goodbye yet. "Do you want to try this again?" he asked, voice hopeful. I smiled, feeling something real and steady inside me. "Yeah, I'd like that." He leaned in and kissed me one more time. A little longer, a little bolder, and then stepped back with that goofy grin that had somehow become my favorite thing. Walking home, I kept replaying the night in my head. The way it all started with a small lie but turned into something genuine. Maybe it was fate, or maybe just dumb luck, but I knew I'd never forget the night I pretended to be someone's blind date and ended up finding something I didn't even realize I was looking for. And honestly, I didn't want to stop chasing that feeling anytime soon. The next morning hit me like a freight train, not because of any hangover, but because of the quiet realization that the night before wasn't just a blur, it was real. I kept replaying Jason's smile, the way his hand felt in mine, the unexpected warmth of the whole thing. My phone buzzed with a message from him. "Coffee later? I know a place with the best cinnamon rolls." I smiled and typed back, "Sounds like a plan." Meeting up with Jason that afternoon felt surprisingly natural, like picking up a conversation where we'd left off instead of meeting for the first time. The coffee shop was small and cozy, filled with the scent of fresh pastry and the low hum of quiet chatter. Jason was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, a half-eaten cinnamon roll on the table and a book in his hand. "You're late," he teased, looking up with that same shy grin. "Only by 10 minutes. I shot back, sliding into the seat across from him. Had to make sure I looked somewhat presentable. He laughed, and for a moment, I felt like that night at the bar had never been a lie. We ordered coffee, and the conversation flowed easily. Books, music, bad date stories. Dreams that didn't sound so crazy when said out loud. At one point, Jason leaned forward and said, "So when are you going to tell me the real story behind how we met? Because I still don't buy that you just showed up randomly." I hesitated, stirring my coffee. "Honestly, I was lonely, and I saw you waiting. I didn't want to disappoint you, so I just didn't say anything." He looked at me, eyes softening. "You didn't have to pretend, you know. I'd have liked you either way." That hit me harder than I expected. I'm not used to hearing that kind of thing. People liking me just for me, not some story I'm playing a part in. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Dates became a regular thing. Bookstore browsing, late night walks, cooking experiments that usually ended with takeout because neither of us was much of a chef. We shared playlists, sent each other articles and memes, and slowly peeled back the layers that made us who we were. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when I caught Jason glancing at his phone, his expression tightening like something was bothering him. And there were times when I felt the weight of my own guard, the old habits of pushing people away creeping back in. One night, as we sat on his couch watching an old movie neither of us really cared about, Jason turned to me and said, "You know, I've been avoiding telling you something." I froze. "What is it?" He sighed and looked down at his hands. "That T, who was texting me the night we met? That's my ex." It took me a moment to process. "Your ex?" "Yeah, it was messy. We broke up a few months ago, but they've been trying to get back in touch." I felt a flicker of something. Jealousy, maybe, or just the sting of realizing that Jason's life wasn't as simple as the nights we shared. "How do you feel about that?" I asked quietly. "Confused," he admitted. "Part of me wants to close the door completely, but part of me wonders if I'm making a mistake." We sat in silence for a while, the movie forgotten. I reached over and took his hand, hoping he could feel how much I wanted to be the one he chose. "Whatever you decide," I said. "I'm here." Jason looked up, eyes shining in the dim light. "Thanks, Dan. That means a lot." Things didn't magically fix overnight, but that night was a turning point. We started being more honest about past hurts, fears, hopes. We learned to lean on each other, even when it was scary. And for me, that was the real beginning, beyond the blind date, beyond the pretenses. Just two guys trying to find something real in a world that often felt anything but. Looking back now, I'm still amazed at how a simple decision, not to correct a misunderstanding, led to something that changed my life in ways I never expected. Sometimes, the best stories don't come from perfect beginnings, but from moments of courage, honesty, and a little bit of luck. And I guess I'll keep chasing those stories as long as I can. After that night when Jason told me about his ex, things felt different, more real, more fragile in a way. We weren't just two guys having fun or escaping boredom anymore. There were unspoken stakes now, even if neither of us said it out loud. I could tell he was wrestling with his feelings, and honestly, I was too. Not just about him, but about what I wanted from all this. A few days later, we planned a quiet evening at my place. I'd cooked, well, sort of. It was one of those frozen lasagnas that you pretend are gourmet if you add enough garlic bread. Jason showed up with a bottle of cheap red wine, and that shy smile that made my chest tighten. I was still not great at letting people in, but with him the walls felt a little less necessary. We ate in the dim light of my living room, laughing over how terrible my cooking was and sharing stories about our childhoods. I told him about growing up in a small town, where being different sometimes meant being alone. He talked about his family, the kind of people who always expected him to follow a certain path, none of which included a bookstore or dating men. There was a pause after one of his stories, and I caught him looking at me like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure how. When he finally did, his voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. "I've been scared to start over," he said. "After everything with my ex, part of me wonders if I'm just setting myself up to get hurt again." I nodded, understanding perfectly. "I get that. I've built a lot of walls too. Sometimes it feels safer to just keep people at a distance." He reached across the table, brushing his hand against mine. "Maybe it's time to try something different." His words hit me harder than I expected. I glanced down at our hands, his warm, steady, not pulling away like I feared. "Yeah," I whispered. "Maybe it is." The weeks that followed were a patchwork of moments, some easy, some hard. We had the usual first relationship stuff, awkward introductions to friends, figuring out how to be around each other when we weren't holding hands or stealing kisses, learning what made the other tick. But there were also moments of doubt. Texts from his ex that he showed me reluctantly, his mood swinging between hopeful and guarded, and my own insecurities bubbling up more than I cared to admit. One afternoon, we decided to check out a small art gallery downtown. It was one of those places with weird sculptures and paintings that made you question what you were looking at. Jason loved it, of course, and as he wandered from piece to piece, I watched him with a mix of admiration and nervousness. At one point, he stopped in front of a painting that was basically a blur of colors, and he turned to me with that earnest look that always made me weak. "I don't get modern art," he confessed. "But sometimes I think it's more about how it makes you feel than what it actually looks like." I smiled. "Yeah, kind of like people, huh? Messy, confusing. But if you look close enough, you find something real." He laughed, the sound genuine and light. Exactly. Later, as we walked back to the subway, the city buzzing around us, he took my hand again. This time, I didn't hesitate to squeeze back. Returning to his place that evening felt different, like we were crossing a threshold. The tension between us was quiet but electric, and when our lips met, it was with a certainty that surprised me. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his bed, Jason turned to me, eyes bright and a little vulnerable. "I want this to work, Dan. Even if it's scary." "Me too," I said, meaning every word. But just as things felt like they were settling into something steady, life threw us another curveball. One night, Jason's phone buzzed while we were watching a movie. I saw the name flash on the screen, the one I'd hoped would never come up again. He hesitated before answering, voice low and tight with unease. "Hey," he said. I could tell from the way his jaw clenched that the conversation wasn't good. When he hung up, he looked at me and sighed. "They want to talk," he admitted. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to block the number, to cut that part of his life out for good. But I also knew that healing wasn't that simple. "Do you want me here when you do?" I asked. He nodded, looking relieved. The next day was one of the hardest I'd ever been through. Jason met with his ex at a cafe not far from his apartment, and I waited outside, heart pounding with every minute that passed. When he came out, his eyes were red, and he looked drained, but there was something resolute in his expression. "It's over," he said quietly. "For good this time." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of everything finally lift a little. That night, as we sat on the couch with our knees touching, I realized that love, real love, isn't about perfect beginnings or easy stories. It's about two people choosing each other over and over, even when the past threatens to pull them apart. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to choose Jason. Not because of some mistaken date, but because he made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was worth the risk. The days after that felt like a quiet truce had settled between us. Jason seemed lighter, more present, and I was doing my best to match that energy. We fell into this comfortable groove. Morning texts with stupid jokes, lazy weekends at the park, dinners where we tried, and mostly failed, to cook new recipes. It was simple, but it felt like building something real. One evening, about a month after the whole ex drama settled, Jason invited me over to his place for dinner. No fancy plans, just us and whatever he could pull together in his tiny kitchen. When I arrived, he was juggling a skillet and a phone call, his brow furrowed in that adorable way he does when he's trying to multitask. "Hey, Dan. Sorry, I'm just wrapping up a work thing," he said, quickly ending the call. "Come in." I stepped inside, noticing how his apartment had that cozy vibe now, bookshelves organized in a way that felt like him, little plants on the windowsill, photos pinned up on a corkboard. It wasn't much, but it was home. We sat down at the table, the smell of garlic and something spicy filling the air. Jason grinned, clearly proud of his attempt at making pasta from scratch. "So," he said, passing me a plate, "after last month, how do you feel about us?" I looked up, caught off guard by the direct question. It wasn't something we'd spelled out before, but I knew this was important. I took a bite, thinking it over. "Honestly, I'm scared sometimes. I've got this habit of running away when things get real. I met his eyes. But with you, I want to try. I want to see where this goes. Jason smiled, relief and something tender shining in his gaze. That's all I've wanted to hear. As the weeks slid into months, our relationship deepened in ways I didn't expect. We learned each other's rhythms. The way Jason always needed a little quiet in the morning, how I thrived on late-night conversations. We had our share of awkward moments, like the time I accidentally called him by my ex's name during a text, which led to a lot of embarrassed apologies and laughter. One night, we went to a small poetry reading at a local cafe. Jason was nervous at first, fiddling with his jacket and avoiding eye contact, but I could tell he wanted to be there with me. When the room filled with soft voices and raw emotions, I took his hand under the table, squeezing it gently. Afterward, as we walked the streets under the amber glow of the streetlights, Jason stopped me. "Dan, can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything." He took a deep breath. "Do you think it could last, even with all our messiness?" I smiled, feeling something warm unfurl inside. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I want you in it." He looked relieved, leaning in to press a soft kiss to my forehead. But even as things felt good, life kept throwing curveballs. Work got busy for both of us, stress piled up, and there were nights when we snapped at each other over little things. I caught myself retreating, the old walls creeping back in, and Jason wasn't far behind. One evening, after a particularly tense day, we found ourselves sitting opposite each other, arms crossed, the silence thick. Finally, Jason broke it. "Are we okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The way his eyes searched mine, vulnerability laid bare. "We will be," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But we have to keep trying." "Together," he nodded, squeezing my hand. "Together." That night, we stayed up late talking about fears, hopes, and the kind of love we both wanted. Not perfect, but honest and real. Months turned into nearly a year, and with every day, I found myself more certain that what started as a mistaken blind date had grown into something unexpected and beautiful. One Sunday afternoon, as we lounged in the park watching kids play and dogs chase frisbees, Jason turned to me with that familiar soft smile. "Hey, Dan," he said. "Yeah?" He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small wrapped box. "For all the times you weren't my blind date." "Are you?" Jason nodded, eyes shining. "I want to keep choosing you, every day." I didn't hesitate. "I want that too." And in that moment, under the wide-open sky, I realized that sometimes the best stories come from the places you least expect. From a lie that turned into truth, from a chance encounter that became a choice, and from two people brave enough to say, "Let's try." Because love, in all its messy, imperfect glory, is worth it. Every single time. We sat there for a while after that moment, the ring between us like a quiet promise. The park was buzzing with life around us. Kids laughing, dogs barking, the soft murmur of conversations. But all I could focus on was Jason's hand in mine and the steady rhythm of his breathing. I thought about everything that had led us here, the night I pretended to be his blind date, the awkward introductions, the moments of doubt and fear, the late-night talks where we bared more than just our thoughts, but our real selves. It wasn't a perfect story, not by a long shot, but it was ours. Messy, complicated, and real. Jason looked at me, that same soft smile I'd fallen for, and said, "We don't have to have it all figured out. I just want to keep going. With you." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything settle into something warm and steady. Me too. No grand plans, no perfect endings. Just us. Day by day. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and in that simple act, I felt like all the walls I'd built for so long finally started to come down. Not because everything was suddenly easy, but because I wasn't alone anymore. We walked out of the park hand in hand, the sun dipping low and casting golden light over the city. And as we moved forward, side by side, I realized that sometimes the best kind of love is the one you never see coming. But when it does, it changes everything. That night, as I lay next to Jason, the quiet hum of the city outside our window, I smiled to myself. Life might still be messy. There'd be challenges, doubts, and days when we'd stumble. But with him, I was ready to face whatever came next. Because in the end, love isn't about perfect beginnings or flawless fairy tales. It's about choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard, even when it's scary. And I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments turn out to be the ones that change you forever. And that's exactly what happened the night I let a stranger believe I was his blind date. It was the start of something real, something that felt like home. And I wouldn't trade it for the world.